So in the very near future, the LIV Golf transfer season will begin. We're going to take a look at every single team, which ones are probably going to stay the same, which ones could possibly change, and the ones that are definitely going to change. So the one thing with the off season with LIV Golf is we're not just waiting for the new events to start in February. There is the transfer season leading up to that first event where players could come across from other tours, players could move from team to team, some players have been relegated and need to be replaced. So in this podcast, like I said before, we are going to go through every single team and I'm going to tell you what I think the potential changes are and also who could be potential players that could be coming in. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each team as they finished in the standings at the end of last year. So the number one team was the Crushers. Now, for those of you who maybe don't know, in LIV Golf, the top 24 players are locked in. So that means that they cannot lose their place on the LIV Golf League for next season. Then there is the open zone between 25 and 48. That means that you stay on LIV Golf, but you can be transferred. It doesn't offer any kind of guarantee. You could lose your place in the league if you found yourself in the open zone. And then there is the relegated, which is from 48 and worse, essentially. And if you finished in that, then you should be relegated and you are off the LIV Golf League. But as we will discuss again, there is a potential here where someone who finished in the relegation zone might actually be playing in the league next season. So let's start with the Crushers. So the Crushers won the LIV Golf League season standing. So that takes you through to the team championship. So this is where they finished in the standings. It's not where they finished in the team championship. So at the end of all of the events, with the most points was the Crushers, and they ended up with 3 players in the lock zone, which means that they are guaranteed to stay in the league next year. And that was Bryson in 8th, Paul Casey in 11th, and Annabon Lahiri in 16th. The one player that finished outside was Charles Howell III, who finished 32nd. And that was largely because he got an injury and he missed quite a few events this year and he was replaced by John Catlin. So that would explain why Charles finished a little bit lower down in the rankings. This team are extremely tight. They all seem to get on extremely well. There's a fantastic dynamic between them. They've been incredibly consistent for the last 2 years. The Crushers are not changing. They are going to stay exactly the same for next year. So, on to the team that came second, and this is where we're going to see our first potential change, and this is Legion 13. So, John Rahm's team, they finished with just 2 players in the lock zone, who was John Rahm, who finished first and won the Golf League last year, and Tyrrell Hatton, who finished 4th. Caleb Surratt finished 41st in the open zone, and we come across our first guaranteed relegated player, who was Kieran Vincent, who finished 54th. So that means that Legion 13 are definitely either transferring a player from another team or they're bringing in a new player from outside. Or if they choose to let Caleb Surratt go, then it could be 2 players coming in. So Legion 13, 100% have got 1 player coming in, and that is because, obviously, Kieran Vincent got relegated. Now, I think that a very high chance of that 1 person coming into this team, but there's another team that this player might go to as well, which we'll get into a bit later, and that is Hidalgo, who won on the DP World Tour, Spanish player. He played with John Rahm in some of the in the DP World Tour events that John Rahm played in. They went head-to-head in a playoff for it was a Spanish Open? You might, get in the comments if I've got that wrong. But they end up in a playoff together. They obviously get on well together. You could see that when they played together again in a later tournament. Hidalgo is, I think he's the perfect player for LIV Golf. He's an absolute born entertainer. He looks to me like one of the Musketeers. And he plays golf like a musketeer. You know, he hits the ball and he's moving all over the place. He's down on his knees. His body's swerving. I mean, he's a real character. He's a real entertainer. He's a tournament winner on the DP World Tour now, so that raised his profile quite a lot. And I think that he could be a very good fit for LIV Golf, and I think that he could also be a very good fit for going into Legion 13. So don't be surprised if you see Hidalgo move into the LIV Golf League next season and beat on John Rahm's Legion 13 team. With Caleb Surratt, I don't think there's any chance that he's going to be leaving the league. No chance whatsoever. They really did make a big push to make sure that they brought him from college, and he didn't go to the PGA Tour through the university scheme that the PGA Tour has for bringing players straight into the PGA Tour. They wanted to make sure they saw him as one of the key players coming out of college, and they made a big push to go and get him. So he is not going to leave the league, but I think there is a chance that he could be transferred. And I did make a note of where I thought he might go. If you just bear with me here, because I think that yeah, here it is. I think there's a chance that Caleb Surratt could go to the Rangegoats. I think there could be a trade there between Legion 13 and the Rangegoats. And of course, if that happens, that would then open up another spot on Legion 13. And I think that John Rahm, with his pull and his influence, he could look to bring possibly another player across from another tour, and probably more likely to come across from the PGA Tour. Who that would be, I don't know. It could be absolutely anyone. But don't be surprised if you see two players come into Legion 13. Like I say, there's definitely going to be one going because one got relegated. But it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if Hidalgo goes in there and Caleb Surratt gets transferred and goes to another team. Okay, on to the third team, which was Ripper GC. Ripper GC ended up with two players in the lock zone, which was Cameron Smith 7th, Mark Leishman 15th, and in the open zone, Herbert 25th, Matt Jones 42nd. So no relegations. There is no way in the world that this team is changing. I think that Cameron Smith has actually already come out and stated the fact that there's going to be no change at Ripper GC. They went to the end of year team championship and they won, so they are the team champions. They will want to defend with the same team that won it the year before. So yeah, Ripper GC, no chance of any changes there whatsoever. So then on to the fourth team, which was Smash GC. Smash GC ended up with three players in the lock zone, which was Brooks Koepka 5th, Taylor Gooch 10th, and Jason Kokrak 22nd. So pretty solid showing there by Smash, actually. The one player that ended up in the open zone was Graham McDowell. He finished 29th, so he finished pretty high up. He wasn't far off getting in the lock zone. And I don't see there being any change here. The only change that could possibly happen was if they decided to change Graham McDowell. I think that Graham McDowell and Brooks Koepka are pretty good friends. Brooks made a move for Graham McDowell last year to bring him into Smash GC, so I don't see that being a one-year thing. So I think that the Smash GC will stay exactly the same as they did last year. So then on to the next team, which is fifth, which was Torquay. Torquay finished with three players in the lock zone, so three players that cannot move, and that is Neiman 2nd, Ortiz 13th, and Munoz 23rd. The only one that finished in the open zone and actually was quite close to relegation was Mita Pereira, who finished 47th. But again, these guys are really tight. They're all long-time friends from South America. They pretty much grew up playing golf together. So for me, there is going to be absolutely no changes at Torquay GC either. So on to the Fireballs. Fireballs ended up with two players in the lock zone, which was Garcia 3rd and Abe Answer 12th. And in the open zone, they had David Puig and Eugenio Chicara. Puig was 26th and Chicara was 39th. Sergio Garcia, quite brutally, has already told Eugenio Chicara that he is going to be dropped from Fireballs GC. So that means that Chicara has either got to find another team or he is off the league and he'll have to go and play probably the Asian Tour and the International Series. So this is the other team where I think that Hidalgo could end up. Spanish player, Very good fit for the Fireballs that have got that kind of Spanish look and feel to them. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if the fourth Musketeer ends up going to Fireballs. I think there's a very strong chance that he is definitely going to be on LIV next year, and he'll definitely for me, he'll either be on Legion 13 or he'll be on the Fireballs. But there is definitely going to be a change at the Fireballs. Obviously, with Sergio's connections, Sergio's long time in the game, he could pull something bigger than that. He could pull a potential big signing across to play for the Fireballs next year. The other thing is now, of course, you know, moving to LIV is now a lot easier thing to do than what it was certainly 2 years ago, where, you know, there was a lot of negativity around it, and you moved to LIV Golf back then knowing that you were going to take a lot of stick and get a lot of, you know, negative press, whereas now that is pretty much all gone. So moving over to the LIV Golf League now is a very easy thing to do if you feel it's the right thing to do for your career. So Fireballs, definitely going to be a change. Someone is going to replace Eugenio Chikara at Fireballs. Of course, they could trade someone from another team, but I think it's more likely. I think Sergio wants to make a bit of a statement. I think he wants to bring in another player from outside the league and someone that will really strengthen his team. Next up is Stinger GC. So Stinger GC had 3 players in the lock zone, which was Louis Oosthuizen 6th, Dean Burmester 9th, and Charles Schwartzel 21st. Really solid showings by all 3 of those players. But unfortunately for them, Brandon Grace, their 4th member, finished in the relegation zone, and he is gone. He is gone. Unless he goes to the promotions event and earns his way back onto LIV Golf, it means that Stinger GC are looking for a new member. Now, of course, Stinger GC is a South African team. You know, that doesn't mean that they have to take a South African player. They could take a player from anywhere they wanted to, but just because they've always had this real strong South African vibe to their team, exactly the same as Ripper have had with their Australian vibe, and obviously it's an all Australian team, Stinger have always been an all South African team. So that got me thinking, who could possibly be tempted to come across and join Stinger GC? And I think I've got 2 people that would fit right in there and might, with where they are in their career, they might actually be interested in a move to LIV Golf and the riches that obviously it can bring. And those 2 people are Tristan Lawrence, who is currently going up against Rory McIlroy for the European Race to Dubai title. I think I'm right in saying that he's the only person who has the chance to topple Rory in the upcoming tournament this weekend, and that's when this video will go out. That tournament will actually be happening. He had an amazing Open Championship where he gave a really good account of himself. He's quite obviously a very, very strong player, but it would leave Tristan with a big decision to make, because he is going to finish in the top 10, which gets him a PGA Tour card for next year. So that decision purely is, do I want to go and try my hand at the PGA Tour next year, or do I want to go and join the Stingers and play LIV Golf next year? That's not an easy decision to make, to be fair. I don't know where he would be and where he would prioritise and what sort of golf, what sort of motivations he would have. If his motivations are purely to make money and, you know, set up his family, then the move to LIV Golf League would obviously be the right thing to do, because it's guaranteed money. Even if you finish in last place, you get an absolute flipping load of money put in your bank account. I don't know where he's at, but he would definitely be a great fit as one of the best South African players in the world right now. And the other one as well is Christian Bezuidenhout, who again is a fantastic golfer. He has really come on in the last couple of years. He's currently ranked just outside the top 50 in the world at number 52. He's been putting in some really solid performances on the PGA Tour. And again, I think would be a great fit for Stinger GC to bring another South African player in who can really play and keeps that whole South African vibe going with Stinger GC. So that is my prediction. There has obviously got to be a change there because Brandon Grace has lost his place on the league. And And I think that Tristan Lawrence and Christian Bezuidenhout will be fantastic additions to that team and keep that whole South African thing rolling in Stinger GC. Next up is Cleeks GC. So this is the one which has got clouded in the most mystery at the moment, because on LIV Golf's very own podcast, just only about a week and a half ago, and I did a podcast about this very thing, they intimated that Cleeks GC is going to be rebranded with a Scandinavian feel to the team. I don't know what that would be, whether they, I don't know, it'd be called the Vikings, or I don't know what that would be, but you know, they wouldn't say that without obviously good reason and some good intel to say that. And then that tripped off. It has to be said, it was them who mentioned it, about a possibility of Victor Hovland going to Cleeks GC and it being rebranded with a Scandinavian feel, and it would be Victor's team, because Martin Keimer doesn't own any equity in that team. Victor could be made the captain of that team and be given some equity in it. Now, there has been some reports just very recently, in the last 48 hours, not completely confirmed reports, it has to be said, but that Victor Hovland has had an approach from LIV Golf, and the reports are that he's decided not to go. Again, I don't know how true that is. He might be, you know, we've heard that before. He might be holding out for more money or trying to get more money, or he might generally just not be interested. But that is the very strong rumour. Now, the other thing that someone mentioned in a comment on that video that I did on that rebrand of Cleeks GC made a very good point. Could it be the Højgaard twins that are going to move to that team and have it rebranded in a Scandinavian branding? I mean, I think that would be a great move for LIV Golf. Those are two of the most promising up-and-coming players. Nikolai obviously has taken that jump in his career now by getting a PGA Tour card. He played in a successful Ryder Cup team, gave a very good account of himself. But to have both of those guys, twins, brothers, playing on a team that's given this kind of Scandinavian, Denmark, you know, they might bring in some other Scandinavian players, I don't know. But that would, you know, that could possibly be a possibility. I mean, to just go to their team, which makes, if that is going to happen, it makes it a little bit more difficult, because locked in was Meronk at 17th and Bland at 19th, so they're staying. Keimer finished 40th and is in the open zone, but he is at the moment a captain. That doesn't give you any protection, and also he's not got equity, like I said, so it's not like some of the other captains. And Kalle Samuja finished 49th and got relegated. So Cleeks are definitely looking for one more player, but if they're going to bring in the Højgaard twins, then they would be bringing in two players. Well, then that gets a little bit more murky, because that would mean that they would have to either get rid of their captain, Keimer, which is unlikely, you would have thought. So that then means that they have to find a home for Meronk or Bland, because they finished in the lock zone. They can't not be on the league if you finish in the lock zone. So yes, they don't have to play on the Cleeks. They could go to another team, but they have to find another team that would be interested in taking one of those players. Now, I don't see Richard Bland leaving this team. He's become an integral part of this team. He's almost become the main man in it, really. He's played more of a captain's role than Martin Keimer, I would say. So that would mean that Adrian Meronk, now I think there are some other teams that would be interested in trading Adrian Meronk. I don't think that could be a problem. So this kind of Højgaard twins kind of plan, or this kind of, you know, idea, it could happen, but it would mean that Adrian Meronk would have to move to another team. What do you think? Get in the comments. There's a lot of mystery around the Cleeks and what's going to happen next year. Right, now we're getting into the lower reaches. So we're now going to be with the Rangegoats. And again, this one is all very sort of clouded in uncertainty, really. And that's because their captain, Bubba Watson, finished in the relegation zone. So by rights, really, Bubba should be dropped from the LIV Golf League unless he can find and earn his way back. Now, I don't think this is... I think it should happen. I think if you put those rules in place, they have to be in place for everyone. But I also understand that Bubba Watson is one of the bigger names that is in LIV Golf. He's, don't forget, he is a 2-time Masters champion. He is an equity owner in the Rangegoats, so it does leave them in a very awkward situation. So we're going to just go with the premise that LIV Golf are going to come up with some kind of reason as to why Bubba Watson doesn't get relegated. So let's look at the rest. The only one who finished in the lock zone was Matthew Wolff. He finished 18th, so Wolfie's not going anywhere. He's absolutely massive buddies with Bubba Watson. He loves being on that team after having a terrible time on Smash GC with Brooks Koepka, where those two guys were just banging heads all the time. I just moved that. By the way, Xeon golf clothing. Go and take a look at it. It's absolutely fantastic. I've been wearing it for 2 years. It's the best golf clothing I've ever worn. So, yeah, Matthew Wolff isn't going anywhere. Peter Uihlein finished 27th, and Thomas Pieters finished 30th in the open zone. Thomas Pieters is not going anywhere. He only joined the league last year. He was one of the sort of signings that came across with Tyrrell Hatton, Asian Moronk, and John Rahm. So he's not going to be staying just for 1 year and disappearing. So forget about Thomas Pieters. He is staying on the league. Peter Uihlein is, I think, on a little bit more dodgy ground. I could see Peter Uihlein being dropped from the league if the Rangegoats have got another great alternative of an option to bring someone in from the PGA Tour. And with Bubba Watson's kind of contacts and his pedigree, that could well happen. So, yeah, the Rangegoats is tough to say because at the moment they've got to come up with a reason as to why Bubba stays on the team. I think the best thing they could do to try and explain that is try and say that he was coming back from his injury and he wasn't playing it, he wasn't able to play at his maximum. If that was the case, they should have just given him a medical exemption last year and just said, look, because of that, Bubba's going to be exempt from relegation, But they didn't do that. But I'm guessing that's a reason they may come up with to keep him on the Rangegoats. But I think Peter Uihlein could be going. I'm not sure whether there's another team that would pick him up. So I think that Peter Uihlein is in danger of being relegated down onto the Asian Tour and the International Series. And that's what could happen if you don't get in that top 24 and you end up in that open zone. That open zone leaves you with no guarantees whatsoever. You are just hoping that your current team want to keep you or another team wants to trade you. And I'm not sure whether that's going to be the case for Peter Uihlein. Okay, now on to one that at the start of the year we wouldn't have expected to be down here so low, and that is the Four Aces. So the Four Aces, I've got two players that finished in the lock zone, which was Dustin Johnson 14th and Patrick Reed 20th. Those two are obviously not going anywhere. Dustin's the captain and equity holder, so that's obviously he's not going anywhere. And two players finished in the open zone by the skin of their teeth, man. I mean, literally by the skin of their teeth. Harold Varner finished 43rd and Pat Perez finished right on the bubble in 48th place, the last place in the open zone. So Harold Varner is not going anywhere because he has actually come out and said, or I think it's his manager has come out and said, that he has a contract through to the end of 2025. So that means that Harold either stays on the Four Aces or, again, he has to find another team or there's another team that would like to take him. Now, based on the play that he did last season, I don't think, his stock has gone down quite considerably because he didn't play well. That's why he's finished 43rd out of 54 players. You obviously haven't played that well if that's the case. But I think that the Four Aces will keep him on and he will be, their third member along with Dustin Johnson and Patrick Reed. Pat Perez, the same as Peter Uihlein, I think he is on very, very dodgy ground. I think that Pat could possibly lose his place in the league. Now, the one thing that he does have as in his favour is that if there's anyone who is best mates with Dustin Johnson than it is Pat Perez. But I just don't think that you can have that kind of strategy where you're keeping people on your team who have not performed well just because you're good mates with them. You've got to look to try and strengthen your team. It's like any franchise, whether it's your soccer team, your American football team, your basketball team. If there's someone who's not performing, you look to replace that person with a better player from another team or coming out of college. And I think that is what the Four Aces need to do with Pat Perez. He's had a great run. You know, he is quite a bit older. He's had an amazing run on LIV Golf. He's earned an absolute blinking shit ton of money. So in the 3 years or 2.5 years that he's been on LIV Golf, so he can have no complaints whatsoever. But I think that the Four Aces are going to drop Pat Perez, and I think they're going to bring in a quite well-known, strong player from the PGA Tour, and that's where I think Dustin Johnson is going to flex his muscle. He's going to get in touch with some people, and he's going to convince someone to come over and join the Four Aces. Because the Four Aces, you know, LIV Golf had this thing that, you know, because they won the first year and then they did really well in the second year, they were like, oh, they're a dynasty. How can you have a dynasty after 1.5 years? For God's sake, a dynasty takes decades. You know, it was embarrassing that they said that, to be honest. But the Four Aces are without doubt one of the sort of marquee teams, and they can't afford to be finishing this low down. They need to be up near the top, and in order to do that, I think they need to drop Pat Perez and bring in a really strong player, either from another team or more than likely from the PGA Tour. Next up, it's the old Majesticks. This is the one that gets my goat, gets my range goat, more than any other team, and it's just because of this 3 captains thing. It means that the transfer thing is almost obsolete, really, because there's 3 of them that can't be moved or transferred because they're equity holders in the team. So none of them got into the lock zone. Surprise, surprise. They all ended up in the open zone, and the best one was Sam Horsfield at 31st. Henrik Stenson finished 35th. Westwood finished 36th, and Poulter finished 37th. So they were all together. Like I say, Stenson, Westwood, and Poulter can't be moved out of the team because they are equity holders and captains. So that means that the only possible person who could be moved is Sam Horsfield. And I think, considering that he finished as the best player on that team last year, and he was coming back from an injury, by the way, I think it would be extremely harsh to drop Sam Horsfield. Would another team be interested in trading him? I think quite possibly. Sam is a very, very promising up-and-coming player. When he's playing his good stuff and he's fully fit, he plays some fantastic golf. But I expect the Majesticks to stick with Sam Horsfield, and I don't think that they're going to change at all for next season. But I have to say that if Stenson, Westwood and Poulter don't come up with the goods in 2025, they've got a big decision to make. I think they've got a big decision to make. If they really want that team to go on and be successful, and they have another underperforming year, then they have to think about taking a step back, becoming non-playing captains and transferring some players in from wherever to try and make that team raise up to where they want it to be, because the Majesticks, ever since LIV Golf has been in existence, have spent the entire time right at the bottom of the league. It's not good enough. You know, and I say that because those players are, you know, real heroes to us in the UK because of their Ryder Cup exploits and, you know, what they've done for European golf, the likes of Stenson winning the Open and playing in so many Ryder Cups. Westwood, I remember Westwood playing in the Ryder Cup in Valderrama in, I think it was 99, something like that, as a young lad. You know, he's an absolute icon of British golf. And Poulter obviously built his whole reputation up of just playing unbelievable golf in the Ryder Cup. But, you know, there comes a time that if you're not producing the goods and you're in a team, then you have to think about doing the right thing. And next year, all of those guys have got to come up with the goods. Okay. On to the next team, which is the High Flyers. Good old lefties team. So they did actually have one player who managed to get into the lock zone, and that was Brandon Steele. That will be largely due to him winning one of the events, which would have got him a load of points and a load of money, and would have basically, I think, pretty much guaranteed his place in the lock zone. That said, he finished 24th, so he was in the last place in the lock zone. But you're in the lock zone, you're guaranteed to be on the league next year. So Brandon Steele, I think, will definitely be staying on the high flyers. Phil Mickelson, obviously, is not going anywhere as the captain and equity holder in the team. And although I think we all agree that Phil Mickelson's best days are well behind him, he's still a massive name and a massive character in the game of golf, and is still bringing some good stuff to the LIV Golf League, in my opinion. But, you know, how many more years he's got left, I'm not sure. I think Phil himself has actually been quoted as saying that he does realise that in the not-too-distant future he will be taking a step back as a non-playing captain. So that leaves the other two players. Cameron Tringali finished 28th in the open zone, and Andy Ogletree finished 34th. So I think both of those are in danger. Probably Ogletree more than Tringali, because Mickelson brought Tringali in. I think those two are good friends. I think that Mickelson will give Tringali another year. Whereas Ogletree, you know, he won the International Series last year, which earned his way onto the LIV Golf League. I think that there's a very strong chance that the high flyers will possibly drop him for next year. Although, literally just as I'm saying these words now, I seem to remember him saying on the LIV Golf podcast that he is guaranteed on high flyers for another year. That could be true. That could be true. I seem to remember that. Get in the comments and say whether you've heard that as well. That, of course, doesn't mean that he stays on the high flyers. It could mean that he gets traded to another team. To be fair to Andy Ogletree, he had a strong end to the season. He played some good stuff. So, and I'm all for someone who's earned their way onto this tour and deserving to get their full chance at it. So I would like to see Andy Ogletree stay on the high flyers or get his trade to another team. So that said, if Tringali's not going anywhere, then I think the high flyers might stay the same, which I think is a problem, because I don't see that team with that roster actually getting themselves up the league. They're, again, like the Majesticks, they're continually finishing down at the bottom end of the league. And then we finish onto the bottom team, the last team in last place, who I think have come in last place for the last 2 years, and that is the Ironheads. No one in the lock zone. Kevin Na 33rd, David Lee 38th, and Junichi Kazuma, I think his name is, 45th. So they all finish in the open zone. They do have a relegated player who is Scott Vincent, who finished 50th, so he is gone. So without doubt, the Ironheads are looking for a new, at least one new player for next year. Now, I have to give a shout out here. The Ironheads surprised everyone in the team championship and made it through to the final. They beat the Crushers, which no one thought would happen. And then I forget who they beat in the semi-final. But again, it was a surprising result. I think it might have been Smash GC. And they made it to the finals. And in the finals, Kazuma was like the star man. I mean, he stepped up. He was holding clutch putt after clutch putt. And they won by far their best payday in that team championship. And it was largely down to Kazuma's performance. So I'd be really disappointed if they didn't keep him on the team for next year. Kevin Na is similar to Martin Keimer. He is a captain, but he's not got any equity. So that doesn't guarantee you anything. But I don't think Kevin Na is going to go anywhere. But there is one big fly in the ointment here. And that is the rumours that Hideki Matsuyama is possibly going to be making the move to LIV Golf. And if that happens, I absolutely guarantee you that he will be installed as an equity captain of the Ironheads, because the Ironheads does have, obviously, that sort of Asian feel to it. They've got Asian players. I know Kevin Na's an American player, but he's an American-Asian player. Danny Lee is from New Zealand, I think, but has Asian heritage. Kazuma is from Japan, and obviously Matsuyama is Japanese, the biggest Japanese sports person from that country, bar none. So I think that could be the possible change there. I think that possibly replacing Scott Vincent, who got relegated, it could be the biggest signing of the year, with Hideki Matsuyama going into the Ironheads, taking over the captaincy and becoming an equity stakeholder in that team. And, possibly staying with those three players underneath, but there is definitely some scope there for any of those players, Danny Lee or Kazuma, to be traded out. So, we've been through every team on the LIV Tour, and you know what? There was only 3 teams there that I thought were definitely going to have no change. So that means there are going to be a lot of transfers, a lot of trades, a lot of new people coming in, which creates a lot of buzz, a lot of rumour, a lot of conjecture. And it's one of the things that I think is good about LIV Golf. It's one of the things that in the off-season, while we're waiting for their events to start, it adds some extra interest. There's rumours flying around, especially when there's going to be, possibly a big-name player coming across. This team thing that LIV Golf has got, there's an embryo of a great idea there. That it just feels like they're not quite nailing it yet. I can't put my finger on what it is, but there's definitely, something really good there that could become something really good in the future. It just doesn't feel like they're quite there yet. Maybe it's just that we need a bit more time to get used to it. I don't know. But certainly this off-season part of it, where there's these trades and transfers and possible new players coming in, it does add something completely extra that golf's never had before. We've never had anything like this. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But please, get in the comments, let me know what you think. Is there any players that you think could be moving to a team? Any trades between teams that you've possibly maybe heard a rumour on, or you think could be a good fit? I think that Legion 13 is the one that I'm looking at, where I think John Rahm is looking to do a big flex and possibly let Caleb Surratt go elsewhere, and then bring in 2 really strong players to try and make that Legion 13 team an absolute force next year, because I don't think anyone doubts that John Rahm and Tyrrell Hatton are 2 of the best golfers in the world. So if they could add another 2 strong players to that team, then Legion 13 could be, without doubt, the team to beat next year. Please get in the comments. Let me know what you think. I always love to hear from you. And I will see you in the next podcast.